continue to improve that practice. And hopefully people over the last couple of weeks have been able to see some of those improvements. Just because those improvements have been put into place does not mean that we've stopped finding ways to make things better for our students. At the end of the day, we'll continue to improve what we are doing. And I look forward to some new information over the next couple of weeks from the UCs and CSUs around grading policies, which should make things a lot better for students, especially completing their senior year. Before we answer any questions, I do want to just take a minute. I think one of the hardest parts for anyone in my position is to have to send that message out to our senior class. There are rites of passage that are critical and are not something that we generally expect to be voluntary or optional. And all of a sudden, we're talking about prom, end of the year awards, senior retreat, and graduation as concerns. While we're dedicated to making sure graduation continues on, and we'll talk about that later, it just breaks my heart to have to send that message out to our senior class. I know how much they've dedicated to their career at UPA, to connecting to their future. And that part, I wish a pox upon COVID at this point. So I will answer any questions that you have because I want to make sure everyone truly understands the ramifications of going to distance learning from now until the end of the school year.
Yes, will there be any additional protocols in place in terms of finals?
Yeah, we're looking into that now. Most likely what will happen is that we will cancel any sort of finals, but we will continue with distance learning during that week of school. One thing we do not know at this point is that seniors generally do not have to attend school that final week. So we're finalizing that protocol at this point.
Just to go back to what you said before. So the possibility of other students besides the seniors would be going to school to take the final, like on campus?
No, students would not return to campus for finals. It's just, we believe that at this point, with all of the stressors going on, every family is dealing with the impacts of the shelter in place with the school closures in very different ways. It doesn't seem equitable to have students take finals during finals week. It seems at this point that a much more equitable system would be to just continue school up until the last day. I think that is that first week of June.
And do you see the closure extending into next school year?
No, I don't. I am optimistic, although I am not a doctor and I do not have all of the data that the CDC has or the state of California Health Department has. I'm thinking positive, and that's why we have planned to have graduation on Friday, June 12th, and 8th grade promotion Tuesday, June 9th. There is a light at the end of the tunnel right now. It looks like the shelter in place in California is starting to show some positive results. And I'm encouraged by that, but the goal is to have graduation. So I don't see school being in a shelter in place in the future in the fall. Hopefully we'll be back to our normal everyday lives.
So now that it's been confirmed that distance learning will be taking place for the last 2 months of school, is there any plan to centralize like a platform or two that the teachers will be conducting their distance learning on?
At this point, we've not looked too deeply into the number of different platforms. What I'm working on right now with teachers is to ensure that they are providing directions for submitting work in terms of how to log into a Zoom lesson, where to find the work, where to submit the work. We're hoping that through this innovative process that teachers will find different systems that will work well for their classrooms.
What will happen to the school materials that need to be returned, such as textbooks?
That's a great question. We are planning on having book and technology returns the week of June 8th.
In reference to those book and technology returns, do you have any like safety precautions that you're planning to put in place during this? Because we're going to have to be showing up to school and coming in contact with staff and everything.
At this point, yeah, the first thing that has to happen is that the shelter in place has to be lifted, and that we're allowed to start to conduct essential business. Once we collect those materials, currently there's the social distancing. I'm assuming that might continue during that week. So we will make sure that we create a pathway for people to turn in their materials, possibly just a car drive up and drop off. But in terms of the books and laptops and hotspots and all of that, we're going to quarantine them for a week before we even attempt to clean them.
Why cancel prom instead of rescheduling it for sometime during the summer?
That is that is just such a bummer. It's painful. It's a painful question and a painful decision to make. At this point, I can't, and we could not confirm a venue. With venues being closed right now, they're unwilling and unable to guarantee that we could actually have a venue at this point. The amount of cost to families right now is another concern of mine. Prom is an expensive event. And right now, there is a huge flux in terms of the financial picture for each family. I don't know what that's going to look like as the shelter in place and our response to COVID-19 continues. And I've heard directly from families about the financial and potential financial implications of an extended shelter in place. So at this point, prom, I just can't guarantee it. And I know that it's an expense for families. And so the safest thing at this point is to cancel prom.
What is the possibility that senior events such as a senior banquet would be still happening inside the gym during the summer?
That's I'm not going to rule that out. I like the idea of it. I think I had a senior email me about having prom later in the summer as well. While I won't rule them out, the key pieces that have to go into place to have those events, again, it has to be a safe space, and we have to have the approval of the county health department to start to allow groups of people to gather in one location. Without that clearance, everything is up in the air.
This question comes from reporter Romita Pakrasi. Will we have to extend school during the summer, or will school end on June 4th like planned?
School will end on June 4th. And just to repeat something earlier, is we were looking into, and we will reach out to the seniors. Traditionally, they do not attend schools that last week. They're preparing for graduation. So we will get back to seniors on what that last week looks like.
So the projection for like senior graduation and 8th grade promotion is what you already stated. But is there any Is it likely that they will have to be moved? Like the dates will have to be shifted to another date?
I'm hoping with 2.5 months that we have the ability to have seen that the curve has flattened, as we keep hearing about, and that we will go back to at least a space where groups of no more than 250 can gather. In that case, we could hold graduation or 8th grade promotion.
Can you tell us about the Zoom incident that sparked the Zoom precautions teachers are now taking?
Yeah, so we learn something new every day. There's a thing called Zoom bombing, where outsiders or hackers try to take over a Zoom meeting, and they disrupt it by shouting out inappropriate words, or they'll put up inappropriate images or videos. So we had I believe it was a 7th grade math class that was just getting started in their lesson, and someone jumped into the Zoom session and put up some inappropriate images. The teacher reacted immediately, shut down the Zoom session, tried to restart it, noticed that there was someone in the group that the teacher didn't recognize, and then shut it down again. And then reported that to myself and reached out to the families. Hearing that, we moved very quickly and had teachers do 5 things, which was to disable screen sharing, so that there's only one person who's controlling the meeting. That the teacher has to be in the meeting. This is a setting that anyone can turn on before anyone can join the meeting. They'll invite students to a more restricted meeting space, meaning that there's a password associated with going into that space. And then if there is a password, the teachers will send that out. Finally, by enabling the waiting room, teachers can monitor who's coming into the room, and people can't just jump right into the meeting without the approval of the teacher.
Knowing what came out, I believe it was earlier this week about Zoom and the company selling the private information of some people. Has there been any precautions for teachers to not use Zoom, but instead use alternate, I want to say, sources or programs?
Right now, Zoom is by far the easiest for our staff to use. I know that we have math teachers who really successfully have used Zoom to be able to create study groups and smaller study sessions. And that's been very positive, but I also know that we're looking into all of the different Google Suite options and the WebEx options as well. But at this point, what we're trying to do is just support teachers in what will work best in terms of delivering instruction.
So in the email, you mentioned that the athletic awards, end of year awards, and senior night awards will be announced digitally. Will that be in a Zoom meeting or through an email?
That's to be announced. We're still working on that. We're looking right now at either doing a Zoom or something along those lines for the end of the year awards, or at least creating a page or some sort of system where people could go and at least find out if they won an award or a scholarship.
With changes such as SAT requirements being lifted and AP testing being moved online, how do you see this closure affecting future college admissions?
Ooh, that was a big question, and something that I think really prompted myself and the entire staff to make sure that we transition to distance learning very quickly. If you've talked to your friends at other school sites, some of them are just starting distance learning now. And that was a major concern about making sure that our students are still able to achieve our mission. So there's been some really dramatic changes over the last 4 days, it seems like, with the cancellation of SATs. We are still in the process of looking at what the CSUs and UCs have just released. They provided a joint statement along with the private colleges of California to allow the grade of pass, no pass as meeting the A through G requirement. and will not be counted against a student for GPA. That still needs to be studied by us in terms of what's going to be most beneficial for a student. We do have students, and I want to be knowledgeable about those students that are kind of ramping up as they get into their senior year, and they need that final semester of grades, positive grades, to get the overall GPA for maybe a Cal Grant or a scholarship, or maybe a college is expecting a specific GPA. Those issues have not been sorted out. But we're looking at both of those situations around SAT cancellation, AP testing being adjusted, and then how we can give grades that would be most supportive to students. So one thing we're looking at is a potential of pass, no pass, or allowing a student to request a specific grade. So again, we'll have to meet with the directors tomorrow, and then we'll meet with the staff next week to start to plan that out. But at the end of the day, we want to make a decision that gives the most flexibility to families and make sure that students have the ability to maintain that college path.
So this question comes from Publicity Manager Jenna Plaskart. Can you describe how the senior project will work? Because the juniors were supposed to start working on it in March and they have not yet.
We will most likely be looking at a truncated senior project. I'm hoping, if I have enough time, to at least launch it digitally over the next couple of weeks. We are also making some really significant changes to the senior project to really free it up to allow students to really express some more of their own personal desire and future outcomes. And I think those changes, again, hoping over the next couple of weeks we can get that out to students, but we'll most likely have to adjust downwards the expectation and the size and scope of the project. I can't underscore how impactful the senior project presentations and being able to read them this year. While I know that seniors definitely struggled with them in terms of finding the time to do that, those are skills that so many students, when they get to college or beyond, just don't have. And to see that our students have that at such a young age is really making them much more successful down the road. It's not an easy task to do. So we'll look at a modified and simplified senior project for our current juniors. What a great question.
So as of today, over 10 million Americans have lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 and then because of the economic area that we're in right now. And there have been layoffs with that. Will we see anything like that with our school and with any of the staff at UPA?
Layoffs, no. We are committed to supporting every teacher and hourly employee, and we are continuing to fund their salaries as we would if we were in session. What I will tell you is that the long-term financial picture of California and funding education and the way California funds education, we are going to see decreases in the amount of funding over the next couple of years as a result of basically shutting down the California economy to ensure the safety of its citizens. We are in a really special location and a special situation at UPA in that our fund balance or percentage reserve is very healthy. And it is on average 3 to 5 times higher as a reserve fund than most schools and school districts. So we are situated perfectly to be able to withstand and survive an economic downturn. But that does not mean that we're not looking at different types of projections. Each school has to submit a 3-year projection based on assumptions. just 2 months ago, we were building our model based on a cost of living increase, or an increase in the amount of money coming into the school by 2.73%, which is down from the traditional 3%. So we were adjusting downwards to that. But now we're going back and redoing the models right now with a 1.25% increase, or a 0% increase, or a -1%, meaning that the state would not fund schools at the same rate that they currently are, and actually have less money for that. While I don't see a negative in the 20 to 21 school year, I do see potential negatives in the 21-22 school year. So the economic impacts are another year out.
What would those economic effects look for students? Would certain clubs or programs be not funded?
In the worst case scenario, we would spend down our reserve before we negatively impact students. When you're having to deal with financial changes, or dealing with less money coming in, the last place you cut it from is where students are needing it the most. I've been able to, along with our brand new business manager, Ariela Perez, have been able to identify areas of the budget that we could pare down and reduce without really even people noticing the change in service. With that, that's the general goal and general plan for making sure that we're not touching what's the student impact. So I would hope that over the next 3 years, as California rebounds, and I think California will rebound strongly, is that what we will see is that while many schools will struggle, UPA will continue to provide the same level of service.
May I ask where or which departments in the budget you found that have the ability to be pared down?
When you're looking at a budget and looking at a 3-year analysis, there are areas where each budget is basically broken down into different specific areas, and there's areas where there's some overlap. So we have some technology budget lines where there's some overlap in service. And so by paring those down, the money would not go into the reserve, but it would be spent on student services. There's other ways to actually increase revenue. Right now, we're looking at working with our bank to put some of our reserve into a money market account that still keeps our money protected by the FDIC, but would potentially show a return of 1.25 to 1.37, which is an increase of potentially, and again, I'm saying potential because nothing is set in stone yet. It could be a potential increase in revenue of about $30,000. And that's without having to do anything differently. And that would really cover a lot of changes or negative impacts.
So, what is the plan for if the shelter in place is not lifted in June in terms of graduation and 8th grade promotion?
Yeah. So right now, that's the true unknown. That's a really important question. As we get closer to the middle of May, if it doesn't look like the shelter in place is going to be lifted, many schools, including UPA, are looking at trying to do some sort of digital graduation, or continuing to look at potentially moving it down the road, or having to cancel it altogether. Those are pretty much the 3 options that are left at this point if the shelter in place is not lifted. Um, again, I think that Governor Newsom and the local agencies have done a fantastic job and made moves quickly to be able to improve the health of everyone in the Bay Area. And right now I'm just going to try to be optimistic that June 12th is our date. But if not, we are working on those backup plans.
What kind of feedback from teachers have you gotten so far regarding distance learning or regarding a change in average student grades?
So much feedback. I'm getting feedback from parents, students, teachers, and I would say for the most part, the feedback from all three groups is very similar, is that this has been a difficult and challenging transition. So much of teaching, quality teaching, is based on human connection, and being able to have a human connection in a Zoom is really difficult. Distance learning is such a struggle. I think that's the first part where the adjustment is. The second part is the challenge is making sure that everyone is participating in the digital broadcasts, Zoom meetings or whatever teachers are using. And then that students are turning in work on a consistent basis. And so we're continuing to improve and adjust that work. And that's what I think that's what I'm really impressed with by our staff, is they're continuing to figure that part out. But there's pieces that I'm getting from students and from families that there are impacts of social emotional impacts of this pandemic, or financial impacts that are starting to make an impact on the student's ability to truly focus on the work. And so when we meet with the staff next week, we'll be talking again, reminding them about how less is more, and that the getting assignments and getting work down to the most critical factors of learning and what is the most important way for a student to show that they've learned something is the critical piece. And that's what teachers are working on now. Your teachers just finished a bunch of grade level meetings. And so I'm really excited by the fact that came from the teachers wanting to check in with each other, wanting to talk about students who are struggling, wanting to figure out best practices. That is not the case across the valley. And so I'm really impressed with them.
What has the Santa Clara County said to you directly about what they advise for you to do in the upcoming weeks?
The county is trusting in us that we will prioritize distance learning and that students will not go without the ability to continue to learn and grow. And that they've given us the freedom to be able to figure out our best process and plan. But the underlying part is that students, especially students who have IEPs or 504s, that they're continuing to get services and get assistance. When you look at the research around the impact of summer on learning, it's basically, to sound kind of nerdy, but N-1 is that whatever you learned by the end in May, you're at a maximum point. And summer is a minus. On average, you go back one marking period's worth of skill set loss or academic content area loss. And that number, the 1, is also unfortunately a variable depending on what type of family situation, socioeconomic status, how much a student is engaging academically, reading, preparing for the next school year, et cetera. And so that -1 can become even larger the longer the summer session goes. And so that's why I'm happy to see that every school district is now committed to distance learning, because if you look at some other states like Arizona, it appears that they have decided to suspend the school year until the fall. That makes me quite nervous in terms of where those students will be in terms of their abilities, and where that N minus, what is that going to be? N-3, N-4, or greater when they start in the fall. And that's the scariest part. And so because of that, I'm continuing to express to our teachers and to our students that we have to stay engaged in this work, no matter how difficult it is. I think we all face the same thing, which is you have these periods where you're really focused and really just on it, and then all of a sudden you're not. And you're just kind of staring into space. We're all going through that. We're all having those moments. So we're all learning how to adjust to this new part. For those of us that chose to go into education, sitting in an office or a sewing room where I am, it's just not the same thing. It's not what you originally signed up for. You signed up to walk halls and sit in classrooms and be amazed by the ability of students.
And how has distance learning impacted student grades and learning so far?
That's a great question. We're still analyzing that. We are seeing for some students that there is a decrease in grades, and we're trying to figure that piece out. It almost seems to be just as a mystery during live sessions as well as with distance learning in terms of how students are responding to it. Some students are actually improving their grades because this mode is really working well for them. But I think the part behind that is the stress that our families were asking as a state and as a community to asking parents to fulfill two roles at once, to continue doing their jobs, manage the stress of their working lives and how COVID is impacting them, and then to also have to, unfortunately, help out as a co-teacher. I mentioned that in an email to our parents. And the concept of the co-teacher was just that it was an unexpected ask that we're asking parents to do. And that's the part where I think is really a stressor for our families.
Do you have any advice for students while they're going through this tough period?
Yeah. I think it's the same advice I'm giving to myself. When I sit down to get ready to work every morning, I'm looking at a number of different factors. One is what has to be done today, and making sure that I write that down. What meetings do I have to attend, and working around those two factors. I'm also writing down what I need to do this week. And I'm revisiting and realigning that list before I get to work and get started. I also try to take care, and I don't do this every day, and I wish I did more of it. I'm also trying to take care of the social emotional part too. And maybe it sounds a little too hippy dippy, but I try to set some intentions for the day. And sometimes on tough tasks, on long, complicated tasks, I'm trying to set intentions for that portion of the day. And what I mean by setting intentions is, how do I want to feel today? Well, how am I going to respond when I start to get stressed or spaced out? When will I get up to walk around and just kind of take a quick break and get back to work? And how am I, this is the most important part for me, is how am I going to respond when I start to get kind of irritated because I'm doing the same type of task over and over again. So if you're starting to feel overwhelmed as a student, stop, write down what has to be done today. What can you do right now? Is there one task that you can just accomplish, complete, send in, and check it off the box? And then and then go on to the next task. But if you try to look at it all at once, if I look at all the things I got to do at once without categorizing them into now, then, and sometimes then, boy, I would just be freaked out. There's no way I could do it all by trying to do it all at once. Breaking these things up into smaller pieces. And then the other piece of advice is, please, students, and I hope we can underscore and highlight this, reach out to your teachers. They're in the same situation you are. They're kind of in the dark as well in terms of how the lessons are going, how you are doing. They're not going to know until you tell them. So if something's not working, let them know immediately. Don't wait till an assignment is late or not turned in before you tell them that you're struggling. Let them know now. That's what teachers are asking for and begging for in terms of making sure that they can continue to adjust. I'm amazed by the number of teachers who are really responding positively to students who are saying they're overwhelmed or stressed out or need more time on an assignment. They're willing to do that. And that, again, you won't know till you ask. And our staff is willing to respond positively to our students.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question.
So, Mr. Porter, now that the seniors are kind of waiting to see if graduation still exists at this point, what kind of advice or words of wisdom do you have to say to the class of 2020?
The class of 2020, first of all, and I said it in an email to them specifically, I never know if those actually get received or not, but for me, this has been an amazing year. And part of that is getting to know this class of 2020. The openness and willingness to accept me into your lives that are pretty much coming to an end of a chapter. I'm just so appreciative of that, and I'm appreciative of the fact that I get to play a small role in your lives is really important. But underneath it all is you're being given a really big challenge. If you look at the statistics, and someone mentioned earlier in one of the questions, if you look at the unemployment rate, you look at the impact on economy, and you look at the potential that somewhere between 100 and 240,000 people could die. These are real factors, and they are impacting your lives. And how you respond to that individually is the most important thing that you can do. How you respond to what you need to do right now. You've been given a lot of blows, and you've had some stuff taken away. You're allowed to be upset. Email me, call me if you need to yell at me and say, this sucks. I'm with you. But you can't lose sight of the fact that someone in that class is going to be on the front lines to solve the next COVID-19. Someone in this class is going to be in my role at some school or even at UPA, and being able to positively impact the results of young lives. So don't lose sight of the bigger goal. Don't get distracted by all of these other side things and lose the fact that you need to complete that work and complete this senior year. You're given a huge challenge, but as someone who's lived through a number of challenges, it's that's going to define you. It's how you respond to it, and I don't lose sight of the end piece. We will have some sort of graduation somehow. We'll put a bow on this year of some kind, and we will be able to celebrate your accomplishments. We'll figure that piece out somehow, but don't lose sight of what you need to do. Don't lose your future because the present is difficult.
All
Yes,
right.
I
Thank you
agree.
so much, Mr. Porter. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. At Aquila, we are dedicated to updating our community on the COVID-19 school closure. So you can follow our website, upaquila.org, our broadcast channel on YouTube, Aquila News, and our Instagram at UPA_Aquila. I've been Alexandra Rosmarin. Thank you so much for tuning in.